I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and here we normally cover things related to true crime. And lately, people have been asking for us to dive a little deeper into subjects around protecting children. And body education, consent and boundaries, privacy, all of those things are really important as we take a look at protecting kids. And my guest, Rachel, she has a book and she's also a therapist. And I'm super glad to have her here on the stream today. Rachel, if you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
Absolutely. So my name is Rachel Kohler Mulholland. I have a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. I am a licensed professional counselor, and I'm also a university psychology professor. And I'm also the author of the book, The Birds, the Bees, and the Elephant in the Room, talking to your kids about sex and other sensitive topics. And I'm also a mom.
That is, and we connected on TikTok, and I think now you're doing more on Instagram, and you also have a YouTube. And one of my first videos that I saw was you explaining the difference of how you explain things to younger children versus older children within the same video.
hmm Yeah, I have a pretty unique family makeup, right? My oldest child is 18. I have a 10-year-old, and then I have a 7-year-old. And so I've had to navigate the waters of how do you answer a question when you've got very different developmental levels in the same room.
Yeah.
It's fun.
And what really inspired you to start creating that type of content, to write the book? How did all of this come about?
So I'll be honest with you, it was a bit of a fluke. Um, we were it was, the height of COVID. We were all stuck at home, and my middle daughter asked one day about how periods worked. And I was like, "Well," and I just explained it to her. And I had seen a couple of things, I just downloaded this new TikTok app, and I'd been seeing some educational content here and there, but I was like, this feels like something people don't really talk about very much. And if they do, it's always this like really clinical way, and like they also don't think that little kids can get it, right? They don't understand. And so, just on a whim, I took up my phone, and I'm very, very protective of my kids' privacy. I heard there's a comment that my voice is fading in and out, so I'll move the microphone.
Perfect.
I'm probably gesticulating a little too much. So I took my camera up, videotape myself, and I basically asked her to explain how the process works. How do periods work? What happens every month in a uterus? And she did, and I again on a whim posted it to TikTok, and it blew up. And my hunch, which was that people were wanting to know this information and how to explain it, was correct. I got comment after comment after comment and messages about like, how did you get there? How did you get to the point where you can talk about this comfortably, where she has such clear command of the information at a level that is appropriate for her age? She doesn't sound scared. You are clearly not uncomfortable. Like, how did you get there? And it just snowballed from there.
Wow. And did this come up in your clinical work as well, or mostly yeah.
Yeah, so one of the first populations that I ever worked with as a clinician, and even before I was a licensed clinician, when I was working in skill building and doing more of the practitioner side of things, I worked with a really vulnerable population. And I had one particular client who, because of their lack of knowledge, ended up in a very vulnerable position.
Mhm,
And it was even once they figured out where, like, what had happened, they couldn't tell me how they got there.
mhm.
Which is, of course, all I can say as a clinician with
Yes.
confidentiality rules, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they ended up in a situation and they still, like, even though it was there, they didn't know how they got there. And I was like, "This is untenable as a society. We can't do this to our kids."
And we've talked about, on here on my channel, how important it is for kids to know the correct names, even young, so even 2 and 3 years old, to know the correct language for their, do you call them private areas, or what do you call? Yeah, I
We
know,
have we have lots of different
the right
names.
language. Nice, good.
So we do like, we'll call them private parts, we call
Yeah.
them swimsuit parts is a
Yes.
big one for our house,
Yeah.
because, if it's covered by swimsuit, then it should be covered for everybody.
Mhm.
Nobody should see it.
Mm.
We did have to have a very interesting discussion about, "Wait a minute, how come my swimsuit parts are 2 parts of my body, and they're why what's happening there?" That was a fun
Yes,
Fun
because
discussion.
my son, he knows that I wear a shirt, but, like and so I have a seven-year-old, and when we go swimming, I still put a shirt on him because
Mhm.
we get heat rash really easily, and so, he normally does have, like, still, like, a shirt and shorts, but it's like, "Buddy, you can," like, that different people can express things a little differently. And I shared recently that we went to Jamaica and there was a nude beach that was like we could see the nude beach right from where we were. And if my son did look over, and it just so happened that he was so busy looking at the ocean, like he didn't even look over there to see that other side of everything. But I think having these conversations without shame and with the parents first being comfortable be sharing this knowledge. And so I think preparing for these conversations is really important because the worst thing to happen is all of a sudden my kid comes up. Oh, and that actually happened recently. And so my son at 7, he does not know that girls have periods, but he saw that mommy had like my feminine product in my hand. And I didn't want to explain it to him at that moment.
I just need to get in and get my business taken care of. Come on.
I just need like we're on our way to school. Like we don't need to sit down and have this long conversation right now. But I love that your book breaks things down for different ages.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things that I was really cognizant of when I was writing the book is the idea that not everybody has the opportunity to start this from birth.
Yeah.
So it's not fair to write it as if you've already laid all this groundwork.
Mhm.
We need to acknowledge there are going to be parents getting this book who were raised in cultures where this was not allowed or in environments where they were told not to talk, like they were trying to undo cycles in their own lives, and they maybe didn't start as early as would be ideal, and so they're trying to make up some ground, and approaching that idea with compassion and with science was like right at the forefront of my brain, to be able
Mhm.
to say like, yeah, maybe this would have been better if you had done it 5 years ago, but you're here now, and
Yeah.
what do you do? How do you fix this?
Yeah. I love that. What is one of your favorite conversations that around this topic to either teach people because you do scripts sometimes, giving
Mhm.
people language for how to have these conversations. Do you have a personal favorite?
I really love the conversation, the topics that we get to go through in the process of how babies are made,
Oh, yes.
because that is one of the ones where people a lot of adults view it as an all or nothing conversation. I either give them all the information or I give them nothing because 'cause they're not ready, and that's not necessary. It is actually a really cool scaffolded, process that if you know what to expect and if you've thought through, like, how these questions get answered, it can be so fun,
Yeah.
um, because the kids come at you totally sideways on that one, right? Like, they where do babies come from is not about how are babies made. Where do babies come from is, like, literally, where do they grow?
Yeah.
What is happening? How did that work? And
Yeah.
then it's almost never the next question isn't, "Well, how did they get in there?"
Yeah.
It's typically, "How do they get out of there?"
Yeah.
They're
Ah,
much less concerned with, like, we'll deal with the how they got in there later, but how the heck do you get them out? That's almost always the next step, and
nice.
parents are like, "Oh, uh,
And because I think in the parent's mind, they're jumping to the question that's not being asked. And I
huh?"
think that can bring up a lot of stress and anxiety. I told you the this community is phenomenal. And if y'all have questions, I will flag them and introduce them where it makes the most sense. But I love this question from Christy. What's a good starting point for kids that are neurodivergent, specifically maybe on the autism spectrum? Do you because I think that conversation could look a little different.
It absolutely can. So, one of the things to keep in mind, about this topic in general is that it is necessary for all kids,
Yes.
period, the end. And so I saw in the question, right, that there might be some reticence to have the conversation. Maybe the teen is not interested. That means in that case, it's probably even more necessary
Yeah.
because with as we know with neurodivergent kids, I have a neurodivergent kid, I'm neurodivergent myself,
Mhm.
we can sometimes be more susceptible to, exploitation, manipulation, and we can sometimes be targeted by people who are not safe.
Mhm.
And so having the conversation with a neurodivergent teen in particular, um, one of the things that I recommend is windshield time.
Windshield time. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you do it when you don't look at each other. Because it like we know, again, ASD and a lot of the other neurodivergencies, I don't wanna look at your face.
I love that.
It's awkward as heck to look at your face in the best of times, but now you're gonna add on this really awkward topic
Mhm.
or this thing that I'm not really feeling cool with talking about, and you're gonna make me look at your face? Hard pass. Hard pass.
I'm
I don't wanna do this.
I'm gonna give you some extra work. I would really love if you could do a children's version of the is that in the works or no? Or
I
okay.
have that it's on the burners,
Okay,
it's on
good.
the
Okay.
burners. I'm working on a proposal for a slightly different topic right
Okay, cool.
now, but
Yeah,
it
that's
is in the works,
okay.
for a way, like, that we could take some of these what my idea was is, here's a book of questions you can ask your parents
Okay, nice.
as, like, conversation starters, as opposed to, like, here's a book of information and read it, because I feel like a lot of times that can while they're really amazing, there are some amazing
Yeah,
kid-focused body books out there.
yeah,
Sometimes I feel like that is used as a way to escape the discussion.
yeah.
So windshield time, what that is, windshield time is, it's basically just time in the car, and it doesn't have to be a conversation either. Like, I recommend conversations. I think it's really important that they become conversations, but you can also just start with stating facts. You can just say you can be in the car, you're headed somewhere fun, and you say, "Just a heads up, I'm gonna tell you this thing. It's really important that you know it to keep you safe. I just want you to have the information. You can ask me any questions about it that you want or no questions at all. But here's the deal. Your body is changing in this way. It means that this thing could happen. And if you ever feel like that's a thing that might happen to you, we really need to talk about it so that you can be safe." Like,
Yeah.
it's really as simple as that.
Mhm. And I like the idea of when having these conversations not always being face to face, because when I think about sitting down and having these conversations, or it could even be that they're listening, but they might be coloring, or we're doing diamond art, or we're doing a different task. So, as a therapist, I use a lot of therapeutic art and play, and I use different techniques because for kids and teens, not everybody can sit and just look face to face. And I recommend to parents that you can kind of check in to see if they're listening. Like, are they connected? Are they distracted? Because sometimes it can be uncomfortable. And I think saying like, hey, if at any point this kind of gets a little uncomfortable, and then I think having safe adults. So and then breaking some of that shame, because I do think that a dad can explain to his daughter periods, and I think the more comfortable dad is with it, I think that's helpful, because I think in society we have this stigma that, like, because even so, I'm 42, and when I was in my 20s and maybe even early 30s, I used to like go to a female cashier when I was buying, no, like, no, or like if I'm buying like my if I'm buying feminine products or something. But it's like, so I think the adults being okay and having this knowledge first. And I love how you shared that sometimes the adult didn't get the sex education that they needed. And if you all want to dive into this a little bit deeper, Rachel was a guest on a podcast, so I've shared it here before. Casey Davis, they did a talk, the sex education that you wish or should have received, and I'll try to remember to link it in the show notes later. But I thought having conversations like this as the adult, because I think, and then no, it being okay if you can't answer everything that minute. So if they ask a question, you weren't prepared to talk about pornography, and so I think the worst thing you can do is to be like is to shut them down like they asked the wrong question. It's like, okay, I wasn't it's completely okay that you're asking. I'm glad that we're having this conversation. Let me get back to you. Like, let's talk about this day. And then if people are seeing red flags, I think it's important. So sometimes in my practice, I'll have individuals that are engaging in private behaviors publicly. And so in that can bring up safety issues, that can bring up other concerns. And sometimes I've had to refer kids that maybe have acted out inappropriately with someone else and maybe need more supervision. We've had to go for additional assessment just to make sure that everything is okay with that child.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I mention, I think, several times in the book is the idea that, like, one of the really great reasons to start this practice of becoming comfortable having these conversations and encouraging it as a regular part of life is that it does act as a protective mechanism, because it allows you to know what is your child normally getting up to. Now I can observe different patterns of behavior that I'm not used to. Now my kid knows what is appropriate and what is not appropriate for their own body. Um, and I think it's important too because it it removes some of the shame from the parents to be able to say, "Hey, my kids this thing has happened. How do we fix it?"
Yeah. Yeah. And with it helping protect children, I think understanding consent and then healthy relationships. I think tying those in together, when those things are tied in together, as we're talking about safe relationships and unsafe relationships. And if I have a child that's on the autism spectrum and might be open to, like, oh, this person likes me, and they would never think, oh, they only like me because they're trying to kiss me or they're trying to, like, that there's some ulterior motive. They would never think about that. Just kind of saying, like, hey, these are some signs that the person might only, like, they only, you can't say hi to them in public. They only want to talk to you privately, or they're asking you to keep things a secret. That those things are red flags.
Yeah, the secret one is a big one, right? And people often think about that whole secret conversation as, like, adults and kids, which absolutely the
Yeah,
biggest concern, right?
yeah,
But you bring up an interesting point with this idea of, like, well, they won't talk to me in public and they only wanna kiss me when they're blah, blah, blah. That's a thing that we see happen in teen relationships. We
yeah,
see, like, sneaky links and all this stuff, like and if you have a kid who's neurodivergent, who is maybe a little more naive, or maybe who has a low IQ or something happening, right, where they're maybe not seeing all these interpersonal nuances, secrets are a very powerful thing to remind them of, like, if somebody asks you to be a secret or to keep a secret, you can always check with me, and I'll tell you if that secret is a safe secret or not.
yeah. And I love that idea of safe secret versus an unsafe secret. Because a safe secret, and the way that I explain that to clients is like, hey, if you tell me who you like, I'm not going to tell your parents. Like, if
Mhm.
you, I don't care. Your parents said you can't date and you're dating someone, I'm not. Now, if you're dating an adult, that's not a safe secret. If
Right.
you're dating somebody that is harming you, that's not a safe secret. And so I like that idea of differentiating between a safe secret and a not so safe secret, and that people that are truly interested in your well being, they're not going to ask you to keep an unsafe secret.
Mhm.
And I also encourage parents to tell kids if something's not right, and if you can't come to me, come tell your teacher, tell your count, like tell like just keep until you get safe. Keep
Mhm.
letting somebody know, because it can be really hard if people, because sometimes with kids I've worked with, they don't wanna upset their parent, or they don't wanna disappoint them, or maybe they snuck out and then something that they didn't want to happen
My
happened.
fault.
Yeah, and that
Mhm.
and that shame that can kind of come up. And so being able to have these conversations, I think it's incredibly important.
Well, and I love too the nuance that allowing like again, I wrote about this in my book with the concept of secrets, right? Kids under 10, I don't advise secrets at all.
Mm,
I don't think we should be doing secrets for kids under 10 because I mean, starting at about 9, 10, they're starting to bridge into some more formal operational thinking. They're starting to get more nuance. They're starting to understand the shades of gray in the experience of life. But under that, we're talking about kids who really don't get it. They don't understand unsafe secret versus safe secret. Like,
yeah,
they might in very specific situations, but they're very concrete thinkers. You have to spell out every single scenario where this is a thing.
yeah,
So when you're little, you don't do secrets. We do Surprises.
Nice.
We'll do
I like it.
surprises all day because surprises are meant to be found out at some point.
Yeah.
If somebody finds out by accident, it's not gonna be the end of the world, and nobody's gonna get hurt by a surprise,
Yeah.
period. Whereas secrets, you can't always say that. So
Yeah.
if somebody's asking you to keep a secret, that's a "Hey, mom, somebody said I had to be a secret. Let's chat about that, okay? Because I don't love that."
I
And then as you get older and you have a crush and you wanna do all these things with other people, now you got secrets. If you don't wanna talk to me about it, you go talk to, Auntie Dodo or all of your various safe adults. You can talk to them.
and I like that you said safe adults because I like it when it's another safe adult versus another child that might, that I think that's where issues and problems can definitely come up and happen.
Oh, 1,000%. I think it's kids are both incredibly insightful about their own experience and also so blind to what's happening. Like, it's the most fascinating duality, and I remember being there, right? I remember being the exception in my own head, like, and rationalizing things that I knew were not smart,
Mhm.
but I just did them because I was the exception.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, a fair amount of the time I was the exception, so I would just keep doing stupid stuff. Uh, but, that's part of growing up. But I think I was really lucky because in a lot of ways, what I'm talking about now, what I've written about in this book, this is not new in my life. This isn't something that I just made up on the fly. A lot of it is based in how I was raised. And so I took how I was raised. I read a lot. I read
So you were raised with this information, like
I was raised with a lot of it, not all of it,
yeah, but yeah.
but I was raised with a lot of it, right? My mom was a physical therapist. My dad was a social worker.
Okay.
We were primed to be very, very well informed and very, very safe.
Nice.
So,
And,
but
nice. I like that because I know, and so I grew up in with some purity culture stuff, and those were things that I had to address and break, and I like because sometimes within Christian settings, they're not giving full, the education that somebody needs to stay safe, and, sometimes the girl can be blamed even if in situations because sometimes there are teachings that talk about, dress in a way that doesn't make, your brother fall. But it's like, wait a minute, like, but what if he's really cute and he's walking around without a shirt? Like, like, why can't he protect my heart too? And so sometimes there
exactly.
could be these standards. And so I love the information that is in the book. As I mentioned, I have recommended it to clients, and I love that you wrote it at a level that is very digestible. It's not this therapist-y speak, like, it's broken down in a way that's really helpful.
Well, my whole goal with it was to be able to make it readable both just
Yeah.
straight through where you could sit down and enjoy it, or you could use it as a reference guide,
Mhm.
right? Skim the first couple of chapters and then pop into what you need. You don't have to sit down and read the whole thing. I feel like it's readable that way. I kind of like
Yeah.
the stories, but I wanted it to be something that you could literally just carry throughout your child's entire life
Mhm.
and have it as a quick reference guide.
Nice.
Because like especially with purity culture, right? Like so much of what we are talking about with parenting our children involves reparenting ourselves,
Yeah.
and that's hard work. And having to do it on the fly when you've got a kid being like, "How do babies get in the uterus? Something, 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 Cabbage Patch? I don't know. I got
And
nothing."
not expecting the school to tell it all because, even, I'll never forget, and I don't know, because I must have misheard something in health class because I came home after I was like 4th grade, after our very first talk, I came home and I was like, "Mommy, I'm gonna die from my period." And she was like, "What?" It was like, "I'm," because for some reason, I couldn't get stuck off of, like, I thought they used the word gushing, and I was just like, I'm gonna I don't but somehow I was like, I am gonna die." And
Poor baby
but
Patrice.
but we were close enough that I didn't understand, and I could go and talk to my mom, and she was able to be like she didn't laugh in my face, thank God. I hope I could do that. I have a dark sense of humor. Okay, but, like, she was able to help, and she was able to re-educate, we were able to talk about other things. We had talked about, like, sex and other conversations. We just hadn't had the period talk yet. And so I think making sure that the parents are directing some of this information. I get a little scared when parents can opt out of the information, but it's okay. It's like I get
We got
oh
lots of battles, man. We got lots of battles.
pick and choose those battles because when people don't understand, that's when I think it leaves kids open to not understand consent, to not understand their parts and what's okay and what's not okay. And it can really cause issues down the road.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the big problems that we run into is the fact that when kids and parents both are not armed with information, um, it doesn't just leave the kid vulnerable, it leaves the parents vulnerable too.
Mhm.
Because, and not obviously in the same way, not
Yeah.
the same sense of vulnerability, but, like, to a certain extent, that's putting your relationship with your child on the line a little bit because it's leaving room for somebody else to swoop in and be like, "Well, I'll tell you."
Like, "Ooh, your parents didn't tell you, like, let me talk
Mhm.
to you about this game we can play." And that's where I think, it leaves kids open to be either by peers or by people older, to just, have potential harm,
Yep,
and
and even if it never gets to the harm level, right? Like, if you find that if you leave these big gaps
yeah,
in what you're willing to talk about with your kid and what you're not, like, "I won't entertain this at all." Okay, then you leave room for somebody else to start to usurp the relationship that you have with your kid.
does the book
And
sorry, go ahead.
no, you're good. It's very scary.
Does the book talk at all about some of the sexploitation or, like, when, some like, sending pictures or and okay, good, good.
Yeah, so I do a whole section on what is grooming anyway,
Yeah. Mhm.
because there's a lot of misunderstanding about what constitutes grooming, what
Yeah,
isn't. And because it is kind of a fuzzy topic, right? The idea of, like, because we'll hear people, "Well, she's an adult, how could she be groomed?" You can still be groomed. That's very much still a thing that can be happening. It happens less and less as we get older, but it's not just about age, it's about power differential and
yeah.
dynamics, and understanding where you are safe and where you are not. And so, yeah, there's a whole section in there about grooming, and then there's also a whole section in, about, like, technology.
Mhm,
And so it's funny 'cause my 10-year-old has a watch. She's got a
mhm.
smartwatch, but she doesn't have a phone.
Yeah,
And she's getting a phone when she turns 11. That's the family rule. You get one when you turn 11, and it is so ridiculously locked down. It's funny. But she already can tell you, you don't put things in a text message that you wouldn't want Nana to read
yeah,
because you never know who's gonna read it. You have to assume that whatever you're sending out there is not being read by just the eyes you're sending it to.
yeah.
And, like, she doesn't have really any concept of it, but then we talked about how she's got this girl in her class who is not super kind.
Okay.
She's really struggling with some various behaviors as far as, like, being manipulative and being quite mean to other girls and baiting and switching, like, "I'm your friend, but now, I get you in this group, and I'm gonna tell them that you suck really hard." It's
Yeah,
just very weird.
yeah.
And I said, "Can you imagine if you thought that this girl was your friend and you told her a bunch of secrets on text messages, how you would feel if she showed them to other people?" She
Yeah,
was like, "Oh my god." It had never occurred to her that that could happen.
yeah.
And I was like, "That's why I'm going to read all of your text messages for a couple of years once you get a phone."
Mm. So I
Because
love because, some therapists are weird about that privacy and so I think once my kid has a phone, I definitely if something's going on, if something's wrong, I wanna have the ability because when I give him a phone, it's not his phone. I'm letting him use my phone. Like, that's gonna be my
Mhm.
language. Like, I'm not buying you a phone. You no, I'm giving you a phone because it's in my name, it's or dad's name, and, I'm gonna give you access to a phone, and, we're gonna talk about the boundaries around it, and, uh, because sometimes for parents or when kids when they think it's their device and they own it and they can do what they want to do on it, I think sometimes that can increase issues. But that's how with only a 7-year old, like looking in the future, like this is what I plan to do.
Oh, I've been through this. I got an 18-year-old now. We did the whole what does it mean to get a phone and social media?
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think for a hot minute when he was probably 14, my son, I
Yeah.
think, really resented it.
Yeah.
Where he was like, "This is dumb. My friends' parents don't check their phones.
Mhm.
They get to blah, blah." And I know there were things that he was doing that I didn't catch because he
Yeah.
would delete the messages or whatever. Um, but then he had a situation where things really hit the fan,
Yeah.
and he came to me and it was like, and showed me, and I was able to review some things and get some things taken care of, and he was just like, "I get it now." And I was like, "Yep, and you've had practice for the last couple of years
Yeah.
having somebody over your shoulder." And again, like, it's never in a punitive way, right?
Yeah.
I'm not reading your text messages and then yelling at you what you talk about. Like, that's your private, like, you can talk about stuff. I'm gonna know about it, and there's gonna be times when I wanna wash my eyeballs with bleach, but it is what it is, right? The point of me checking your phone is not to police how you talk to your friends. It's to make sure that what your friends are saying and what you are saying is not going to end up in front of the police.
And I think you would agree that if you find something, parents breathe,
Mhm.
freak out privately, but don't freak out in front of your child.
Mhm.
Because I think when a parent and it's understandable. So that's where I tell my parents to fake it. Like if you read something, you're like, "What the fuck?" Like, you're like, you wanna go to the they're like, do not like but to get to a place where you're calm and you're able to sit down with them and say, "Hey, let's talk about this. Let's have a
Mhm.
conversation. So what did you mean? Like, what was going on?" And get curious about what's behind the behavior, what's behind it's like because 'cause I've worked with a lot of kids where they were trying to impress a friend. They didn't know the words they were using. They had heard other people use them.
Mhm.
Because the parent would have freaked out thinking, "Oh my gosh, my child has" but it's like, no, like they didn't even they have no understanding. It's like, "Wait a
Right.
minute, okay, so you use this word. So what does do you know what that what does that mean? Do you know how somebody else might take that?" And getting curious first and almost being an investigator, but, like, being good cop.
Yep. Well,
Because
that's why, like, oh, sorry.
no,
The
you're
the whole first 4 chapters of my book,
yeah,
we talk about the foundations that are necessary for having these conversations, and one of them is that unconditional positive regard. Because there's not you are not gonna be able to maintain your game face every single time.
mhm,
There's gonna be things that happen where you're like, "You have got to be freaking kidding me. We've how many times have we talked about this and you did it anyway, and now I have to deal with the fallout, and you're dealing with the fallout, and what the hell?" Right? Like, that's gonna happen, and then you're gonna sit back and be like, "Oh my god, I so overreacted. That was ridiculous. Why did I do that?" Listen, if the foundation of and the way that I say it is, "There's nothing you can do to make me stop loving you."
mhm.
If that's there, then even when, not if, when you have those moments where you lose your cool or your kid loses their cool and you have that really, really big conflict, you're still able to come back and show like, "Okay, we've addressed this, we've made this work out, and we can move forward."
I love that because, I want my child to know that there's nothing he can do because sometimes what happens is a kid gets embarrassed. So with the sexploitation, for anybody that hasn't heard, and an adult manipulates a child to send them a private picture, and once they do that, the adult then demands money or they'll demand more pictures, and they threaten to expose the pictures, but that adult is the one who has committed a crime. That
Mhm.
it is CSAM, like, it is not and I would rather my child come to me and say, "Whoops, I thought this was my friend." Like and for me to go to the FBI and, go make sure because these are reportable things. Like,
Mhm.
you can't do like, it is illegal to ask a child for inappropriate pictures,
Mhm.
not inappropriate for private pictures. And so, being able to have that space for that child to know because unfortunately, some kids have died and they have not the thought of embarrassing themselves, embarrassing their parents, their family, they could not take it, and I need my child to know there's nothing. Come to
Not a
me,
single thing.
we'll talk about it, and we will figure it out together.
Mhm.
And, because I think that's really important.
Yeah, and it's funny because like, this has been an interesting discourse that I've seen on
Mhm,
social media over the last several months. Last maybe not several, but a couple months. There was some creators that were out there talking about, like, "That's not real. Unconditional love is not real. If my son does this terrible thing, I would stop
mhm.
loving him."
Wow.
And I'm like, I literally can't say that. Are there times when I might have to set boundaries and say, "I can't see you because you're not safe for me?"
Yeah.
Yeah, that would break my heart. But I'm not gonna stop loving him. I'm not gonna stop hoping that he can get better, that maybe my daughter can recover. Like, there is unconditional love, but that doesn't mean there's no boundaries. Like, they can
And I think that
exist in
person
harmony.
would probably have an authoritarian style where it's like it's all rules, and because if I can do something to lose that love, that's will I be disappointed?
Oh,
Will
yeah.
my child have consequences? So I cover true crime here on my channel, and so like if my child, you know, stole our car or something, like I'm gonna be upset. Like we're gonna
Mhm.
have, but I'm not gonna say he can't come home. like he's gonna have consequences. I'm gonna press charges to make sure that he gets whatever help and support. We're gonna get into therapy. We're gonna do all those things, but it's not gonna be something that he can't come where I'm gonna disown him.
Right.
But I will set boundaries.
And
So yeah, go ahead.
that's the interesting thing is, like, I think there are people who just really can't identify what a boundary is and how they
Yeah.
work in those situations. And I actually the last chapter of my book is called Remember, Remember, because, like, one of the most powerful things you can do as a parent is something that we try to get people not to do in therapy, hilariously enough, which is catastrophize just a little bit. What are you gonna do if the worst thing happens? What's your answer? And it's really hard to think about it, and I don't want you to catastrophize to the point where, like, it's gonna happen,
Mhm.
but I want you to think about, like, what am I go how would I handle it if my son got somebody pregnant? How
Yeah.
would I handle it if my daughter got addicted to something?
Yeah.
What am I gonna do? How will I handle that? Because I think a lot of times what we end up seeing is people don't think about it, and then they're forced to react. And then they're forced to grapple with the consequences of their reaction, whether they're good or bad. And so we end up with these families and these family systems that are really, really, in tumultuous situations when maybe a little bit of forethought and acknowledging that, like, life is messy and hard and difficult maybe could have helped just a tiny bit.
Mhm. And we have a good question: how to discuss sexuality with your child. And I think first, so there, I think depictions of sexuality in media can actually be helpful because we can talk about this character in the book that it's a boy that likes a boy, or we can
Mhm.
talk about a character in a book and it's a girl that likes boys and girls, or it's a character on a show. Now, am I going to have am I going to have conversations about sexuality with my 4-year-old? No. But if my 4-year-old comes home saying she likes girls, I'm not gonna say, "You can't like
No, you
girls.
don't.
Girls have to like boys." And so, because when we talk about sexuality, we're talking about who you're attracted to and who you want to be intimate with, and before certain ages, like, those conversations aren't really even happening. But me as a parent, I wanna be open to the idea of whatever my I don't wanna assume so that my 7-year-old, I'm not thinking about him marrying a wife and having I don't know, like, I don't wanna get stuck in this rigid picture of what I want for my child, because I think that can make the grief process, a little bit different. I do have a video on talking about sexuality with kids and about just educating parents on sexuality and gender, because the parent having a good understanding can really be important. And questioning is normal. So to have an idea, but for the parent to not call it a phase. So for the
Right.
parent to not be the one directing the conversation. So being open, listening. Um, and then if there are issues being caused because of some of these things, then talking with an affirming therapist, I think can help. Did you have anything to add for that one?
Oh, yeah, I mean, you said it all absolutely beautifully. I think one of the things that I have found really helpful is, both the sense of curiosity, which is another one of my foundations, right? Is, like, you demonstrating, your power of curiosity and observation. So, like, if you happen to see a couple of dads with their little kid, like, "Oh, look at that family, they're so cute." Those dads really love their baby, and just it's normal to acknowledge families with babies because that's the thing we do.
Yeah.
But we're also pointing, "Hey, look, this is a thing that exists in the wild."
Yeah.
And then I also make a point to not gender
Yeah.
my imaginary play. So, like, when I talk about, like, "Are you gonna be a parent someday?" I wonder
Oh,
who if the person you marry is gonna want babies. I don't say, "I wonder if your husband is gonna want babies." It's, "I wonder if the person you marry is gonna want babies."
nice.
Right? And it's because it's one very simple way to, kind of chuck out the idea that there's only one right way to do it. And the other interesting thing too is, like, they're going to see reinforcement of the norm everywhere.
Mhm. Yes,
It's
everywhere.
not a problem if you don't be one of those sources. They see it everywhere.
Because and that's where I don't think people understand that even so I work with a lot of people that are queer and like, it turns into a conversation because sometimes they have to break their own homophobia and
Mhm.
their own ideas of what things can and can't be. And so, Christy, the question is it okay to find the person who makes you happy? Of course. So,
Totally.
get completely okay.
My goodness.
And so did you have any final thoughts as we start to wrap up here?
I think as far as final thoughts go, I think I really just love that we're having this conversation more openly in general. I think that this is, like, I see my peers and because I knew a lot of girls in purity culture, like, when you're talking about the chewed gum and the who wants an unwrapped lollipop or who wants a balloon with a hole in it, like, I've heard so many euphemisms for being a washed up, used woman, which
Oh, wow.
is something else. Um, and I'm so proud of the parents who grew up in that, who are willing to say, "I'm really uncomfortable, but I don't want that for my kid." And I'm just like, I'm so impressed, and the other thing is, I wanna stress this because this came up a couple of times when I was touring with the book. Um, None of what's written in my book in particular, I can't say this
Yeah,
for all books, but in my book, none of it comes from a moralistic perspective. None of it tells you what you have to believe about when people should start having sex or when people should, get married or when they should start dating. None of that is in there. That's for you and your family to decide.
yeah.
All that my book says is, here's information that will help keep you and your kids in conversation and help to provide them a safe place to understand themselves and other people. And you get to lay your own morals and beliefs over the top of that to make a really robust understanding for your child of what your beliefs are and how they can navigate the world on their own.
And I love that you added that part of that you're not trying to say this is how you should. This is how every parent should have this conversation with their child because I think it's important for it to be different and to be based on what each individual is okay with. But I think the more information someone has, it can give them a good starting point. And the fact that that information is based in things that's correct because what I don't want my son to do, and he'll probably but, like, I don't want him to learn it all from Google or from, like, his friends or, like, I wanna make sure that I'm teaching him, that I'm preparing him for those next stages. And so thank you for coming on the channel today. I really appreciate you. Stay on when I press end. We'll just chat real quick. But this was really, truly a great conversation. And I do think that this information in this book can be helpful for you all down the road. And so I hope y'all have a good one. I'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye.